The air hung heavy with the scent of damp leaves and ancient magic on Elm Street. Old Mrs. Gable swore she saw shadows dance in her garden at night, not from the swaying oak, but from figures too tall, too thin, to be human. They were the monstrous folk whispered to live beneath the forgotten roots of the town's oldest trees, their eyes like chips of obsidian, always watching. This Halloween, a new chill had settled over Blackwood Creek. Elara, the town's oldest witch, felt it keenly. Her bones ached with a warning, not of the seasons turning, but of something far more sinister awakening. For years, a truce, brittle as dry autumn twigs, had existed between the village folk and the forest's lurking horrors. The townsfolk left offerings of milk and honey at the forest edge, and the creatures, in turn, spared their children from the deepest shadows. But tonight, the pact was breaking. Young Finn, daring and foolish, had ventured into the forbidden woods on a dare. His friends, shivering at the tree line, heard his cries, sharp and sudden, then swallowed by the rustling leaves. Elara, her face etched with concern, knew the creatures hadn't acted alone. A new power stirred in the woods, darker and more ambitious than the old monsters. She could feel the icy tendrils of a rival magic, a coven of younger, hungrier witches who scorned the ancient ways and sought to dominate both realms. As the moon, a sliver of bone in the ink-black sky, cast eerie shadows, Elara prepared. Her cottage, usually cozy with herbs and charms, now bristled with wards of protection. She knew the creatures would soon come, driven by the new witch's dark will, to reclaim what they saw as their due. The fear of mortals, harvested on the night when the veil between worlds thinned. The monsters would be terrifying, their forms twisted and grotesque, but the true horror lay in the cold, calculating minds of the witches who commanded them. The first scratching at her window pane was soft, like skeletal fingers. Then came a low growl from the darkness beyond her door. Elara clutched her gnarled staff, its ancient wood humming with dormant power. This Halloween, the monsters were not just lurking in the shadows, they were knocking. And the witches who sent them would soon follow. The scratching at the window grew frantic, a staccato rhythm against the glass that sounded like claws on stone. The low growl at the door intensified, becoming a chorus as more creatures gathered, their hunched silhouettes visible in the moonlight filtering through the trees. Elara's gaze was steady. She placed her hand on the worn oak of the cottage door, not to bar it, but to feel the vibrations of the creature's malevolent hunger. She didn't fear them. They were puppets, their monstrous forms a twisted reflection of the witches who commanded them. As the first monster, a hulking beast with gnarled horns and skin like cracked bark, lunged at the door, Elara raised her gnarled staff. She didn't need to speak a spell. The ancient wood pulsed with her will, and a shield of shimmering silver light erupted from the ground, pushing the creature back with a shriek of pain. But the new witches were smarter than the old monsters. The attack was a diversion. From the shadows of the forest, a different sound emerged, a high, whispering hiss. The air grew colder, and the faint, sweet scent of rotting roses filled the air. A younger witch, cloaked in threads of moonlight and shadows, stepped into the clearing. She was beautiful in a terrifying way, with eyes that held the cold, calculating intelligence of a predator. "Old witch," she hissed, her voice a chilling whisper carried on the wind. "You cannot hold them back forever. Your magic is of the earth and sun. Ours is of the void and the fear of men. We have taken the boy, and we will take everything else." The monstrous forms at the door began to morph, their bodies twisting and dissolving into coils of black smoke that seeped through the cracks in the walls and floorboards. Elara gasped, realizing their true plan. It wasn't to break down her door. It was to invade her home, her sanctuary from within. The monsters were not just a physical threat. They were a manifestation of the rival Coven's corrupt magic. as the shadowy tendrils of smoke wrapped around her feet and the whispering voice of the young witch echoed in her mind, Elara knew the true battle had just begun. This wasn't about power or territory. It was about the very soul of the forest and the town. And on this Halloween night, the victor would claim both. The black smoke, now a choking miasma, coalesced in the center of Elara's cottage, forming a swirling vortex of shadows and whispers. From its depths, the young witch emerged, her features sharpening with cruel satisfaction. "You are a relic, Elara," she sneered. "You cling to the old ways, to a balance that no longer exists. Tonight, fear is our harvest, and this town will be the field we reap." Elara didn't answer with words. She knew this was not a battle of spells, but of a deeper, more ancient magic. As the young witch's power lashed out, cold, sharp tendrils of the void, Elara met it with the warmth of her own magic. She channeled the power of the earth, the rustle of the leaves, the deep, slow pulse of the trees. A wave of golden, humming light radiated from her, pushing against the encroaching darkness. The house trembled as the two powers collided. Glass shattered, herbs flew from their bundles, and Elara's staff glowed with a fierce amber light. The monsters at the door howled as the warmth of her magic burned them, and the shadows they had become began to unravel. The young witch screamed in frustration. She had expected to consume Elara's power, not to be repelled by it. She had forgotten that the oldest magic is not found in darkness, but in endurance. Elara's magic was rooted in the land itself, in generations of life and seasons. With a final, desperate surge, Elara thrust her staff forward. The ground beneath the cottage rumbled, and a vine, thick and strong as a tree trunk, burst through the floorboards. It wrapped around the swirling vortex, its leaves glowing with Elara's light. The young witch was caught, her face a mask of shock as the natural world turned against her. The vine tightened, and with a final, desperate shriek, she was pulled down, consumed by the earth and the magic she had sought to corrupt. As the last tendrils of black smoke dissipated, the cottage fell silent. The sounds of the forest returned, the gentle rustling of leaves and the faint hoot of an owl. Outside, the monstrous shapes had vanished, and the only signs of their presence were the trampled leaves and a lingering chill. Elara sank to her knees, her staff clattering to the floor. The battle was won, the truce re-established. The monsters were banished, and the town was safe for another year. As the moon rose higher, a feeling of deep peace settled over her. The old ways had held strong. The true horror of Halloween wasn't in the monsters that lurked in the woods, but in the ones who tried to extinguish the light. And on this night, that light had burned brighter than ever.